We had a little bit of a mishap on when today's live was supposed to start, but we are live in Fort Collins, and this is actually going to be my last live for 2 weeks. Next week, I will not be here for the first time, and Izzy is unavailable, and I don't have anybody else who's really prepped and ready on the live aspect, who's been trained on it. So this is going to be the last live for 2 weeks. And so sorry we're missing next week. I'm sure you'll just have to get through the week without me, which will be so hard since so many people watch these lives. But regardless, it's really great information. So if you watch it live, that's great. Thank you for joining. If you're watching this on a rerun, we're going to dive deep into the budget today. We're going to go over kind of their snippet. They have a 500-page plus monster of like an all-encompassing budget that if you absolutely love numbers, which I do, and you can stay awake at night while reading, then this would be for you. But there is a 28-page kind of snippet of a budget that really goes over high-level things that we're going to dive into deep. But this is live in Fort Collins. We come to you every Monday, except for next Monday, where we talk to you guys about things that have happened in Fort Collins, things that are happening, and city council review, possibly some developments under review, and ultimately really just trying to stay fully up to date of what is happening in Fort Collins so that if you're considering making a move, buying, selling, or investing, you can make an informed decision about what's happening. Actually, I just talked with somebody who lives on the southeast side of town who's a teacher at Preston and doesn't know about the Southeast Community Center. I mean, this is a potentially $100 million facility that will change some of the landscape on the southeast side of town that some of our residents don't know about. So this, again, is just really trying to get you informed about things that are happening in the city, things that are happening in the community, Northern Colorado. And if you have any questions, make sure to ask them, and I will try to answer them live. If not, leave a comment below if you're watching this on a rerun, and I will get back to it, unless it's just ultra negative, because I just looked at like 4 comments, and I did actually respond to a couple that were not negative, just were someone's experience about not a great experience in Northern Colorado and wanted to respond to that. But some people are just, straight up negative, and I don't really respond to those. So let's see here. We'll get going on what is happening in Fort Collins. Real quick, how awesome has the weather been in Fort Collins? I mean, for a long time. I hope that we're not in for like a payback come late this fall, winter. But for the next 10 days, we're looking at like high 70s, 80s, low 90s even. And we are, as of tomorrow, in October. I told somebody we could have snows as early as September 8th. Just a few years ago, we had a snow on September 8th. Now, the next few days, we had some great sun and it melted right off. But, we are absolutely in that time period where snows could hit us at any time. But we are fortunate. Knock on wood, next 10 days look absolutely phenomenal, and excited about this upcoming fall. Let's see here. Breckenridge Brewery took over. Man, they took over the brewery that is off of LeMay, and I think it's Lincoln. I believe it's Lincoln. But anyways, that building has just been a curse to all of the breweries that have been in there. Big Red Truck has been in there. I mean, I think this might be the 4th brewery, Sweetwater, and now Breckenridge Brewery, and they actually are cutting the brewery production team there, so laying off some employees in Fort Collins only a month after opening up. Now, they are going to keep it open as a tap room and some kind of pilot beers, but I was super excited. I saw that logo, or saw their new building sign, Breckenridge Brewing Company. And I was like, man, that's great to have just a really rock steady brewery in that building, because we've had just some turnover, and it's a huge building. It's gorgeous, but it's just had trouble. So as of October 25th, it will no longer be a full-fledged brewery, but more of a tap room, and still have some kind of like pilot and small batch brewing operations going there. I was just up at Estes yesterday, and man, it is beautiful. Get up there. We are fortunate that we have some great weather on our hands. So you probably got at least another 7 to 10 days of good weather to get up and see the trees changing. You know, we did the peak to peak scenic byway, only a few miles of it, probably only about 10 miles or so of it, of the 55 miles that it runs. But we went to the Lily Lake and walked around. It was beautiful yesterday with some wonderful yellow trees, you know, or yellowing trees, and just awesome. I mean, we were in t-shirts, and Janae, who gets my wife, she gets super cold all the time. She was in, you know, a sundress basically, and it was awesome. Which, by the way, I just got to give a shout out real fast. My wife, you know, we're walking along here, and there was just some dude who goes, well, there's the 2012 Olympic bronze medalist in the long jump. And I was like, yep, that's wild that he knew that. But yeah, Janae stopped, took a picture with him. And then 2 other people were just like totally raving about Janae and her beauty. And I'm like, man, what is she doing with a goober like me? So props to my wife for being such a good looking woman. I'm doing my best. All right. But the reason I was thinking about this is because in Estes, we were driving back down from Lily Lake, and going across the street was probably like 30 elk, 2 or 3 bull elk, bugling, talking to each other across the street. I mean, they are huge. But I mean, and then there was at the golf park, or I think not golf park, at the golf course or some park, there were another 20, 30 elk with tons of people looking, you know, out there. I mean, Estes was jumping yesterday. It was some really rough traffic, honestly. So if you're going to be going up to Estes, you know, prepare for some traffic, be patient. There was definitely some honking of the horns, all that good stuff. So be patient, but it's a beautiful place. I was telling my wife, she's like, man, Estes is gorgeous. And I was like, Estes is definitely like raising its game. It was just ranked, you know, one of the top 10 places to visit in the United States for like a fall visit. Probably doesn't help the traffic, but you know, a rising tide raises all boats type deal. And Estes is one of those places that really just seems to, I don't know, like stepping up its game. It's just beautiful. It's always been beautiful, but it just feels like it's getting cleaner. It's getting more well maintained. Just super, lots of positive things to say about Estes. But talking about animals, bears, mountain lions, and moose are showing up in northern Colorado. Bears, you know, they're coming down to basically get fat for the winter. You know, they're trying to feed on some food. Moose, they could be seen not all throughout Fort Collins, usually just along the foothills. They'll come down and do what's called a walkabout, I guess, and then head up the mountains. Mountain lions will be specific around some bodies of water, the Poudre River and canals, but really going to be focused on kind of the west side along the foothills. Nothing more than what is normal. There was some conversations on social media about how maybe it's because of the wildfires that we've had, but no. And actually, I was driving up 34, and I was concerned that I was going to see some pretty bad burn scars from the Alexander fire. I didn't see anything along 34. That doesn't mean that they're not obviously there. It was 1,000 some odd acres that was burned. But nothing. The Sylvandale Ranch looked great. And anyways, you know, along that foothill side, you're going to see some wildlife, and nothing more than what is normal. On average, the majority of the sightings of bears, moose, and any mountain lions are going to be between August, September, and October. Let's see here. Okay, here's something pretty cool. We talked about just recently, Poudre School, you know, ranked very well on its statewide exams. CMAS, I think is what they're called. CMAS. They scored very well. And Weld County, Weld RE4, and Thompson Valley also scored quite well. But obviously, Poudre School District is, 80s is great. Yes, John, I agree. Let's see here. Poudre School District, super solid. But Zach Elementary is kind of the darling elementary of the entire district. I mean, it's definitely a very highly sought out elementary school. I've heard nothing but great things said about it. I've got some friends who got kids that are going there, and they just, you know, rave about it. But Zach was one of 4 schools in Colorado that was recognized with the National Blue Ribbon Award. And this is actually their second time winning it, their second time since 2000. They last won it in 2018. And what it said, there's only been 16 Colorado schools have received the award twice since 1982. So Zach is a core knowledge elementary school. Great. Here's what the award is for. Let's see here. Excel in academic performance or make significant strides in closing achievement gaps among different student groups. So good on you, Zach Elementary. Just a very solid elementary school on the southeast side of Fort Collins. Some Fort Collins city employees formed a union, but the city manager isn't recognizing it. A lot of these, some Fort Collins Connections employees were banding together because of a Colorado act that came about in 2023, which is called the Colorado's Protection for Public Workers Act, which went into effect July 1st of 2024. And essentially it gives all employees of local governments not covered by other laws the ability to unionize. And Kelly DiMartino is saying, no, we're not going to recognize, we're not going to negotiate. What happened was they are requesting that these City of Fort Collins connection workers come back to the office for 2 days of work. And the city employees are saying, hey, this is like a pay cut because we have to now find childcare, gas, transportation, and we're not getting a pay increase. So they want that to cease, to go back to be able to work remotely. And then also here's what they're asking for: recognize the union, set aside the demands for the return to the office, allow employees greater control over schedules, allow union member to participate in interviews for a new manager, and negotiate higher wages for union members. Now, Fort Collins Connections is kind of the I wouldn't say the darling of our utilities lately, but I would say it's definitely a major benefit of living in Fort Collins. We have a broadband utility that is extremely affordable, less than $90 a month. I think mine's 79, but people said I think it might be 69, but then plus the modem of the rental and all that good stuff. But anyways, I can promise you that it's less than $90 a month for phenomenal gigabyte speed internet. And we actually had Chad Krieger, the director of connections, on our podcast, Fort Collins Fellas, and they've got some great take rates, better than expected. It's starting to become a profitable utility to be able to start paying back a lot of this debt that it took on to build out its infrastructure. But they don't come without problems. Anything that's kind of fledgling, that's growing, that's becoming something that's stabilized is going to go through growing pains. And here is clearly one of them. So hopefully they're able to sort this all out. But it apparently that Fort Collins Connections, their kind of customer service, helps take on some of the pulse. And also, let's see here, that means employees serve customers. Connections provides network support for Loveland Pulse and Estes Park's Trailblazer broadband enterprises. So, it doesn't sound like we're going to have any interrupt of service, but regardless, hopefully they can figure it out. Employees get, taken care of, while also, and we're going to talk about the budget here in a second, because personnel costs are a massive portion of the City of Fort Collins budget. Of their $700 million budget, it's like just about $200 million of that $700 million budget. So about a third of our budget is employee costs. Speaking of broadband, Timnath, one of the fastest growing communities in all of Northern Colorado, all of the country, they are getting broadband, and they are partnering with Pulse, which is the Loveland provider of the gigabyte speed, to kind of to build it out. And they expect it to take 3 to 5 years, which, if I can tell you from our experience with Fort Collins Connections, might be a little bit longer than that. They suggest that there are going to be some people that are going to have service even this year, but a lot of it's going to be groundwork and the build out. But Timnath will have gigabyte speed internet sooner than later, which is quite exciting for our smaller residential community to the east of Fort Collins. So if you live in Timnath, that is something to look forward to, something coming down the way. All righty, now let's jump into the budget. So there's already been one work session. There's been one hearing, City Council's hearing. Tomorrow there will be an additional City Council hearing. So if you want to go in and have your voice heard, if there's any items that are not being funded or that you'd prefer money going elsewhere, this is where you can go and have your voice heard. From there, they're going to have a third work session, which is kind of the final work session, and then kind of put everything into play. So I'm going to share my screen, and you guys can see what is happening with the City of Fort Collins budget. All right. I'm going to talk, and you guys, and if you guys have any questions, don't hesitate to have a look. Okay. These are the main areas of our government: high-performing government, culture and recreation, economic health, environmental health, neighborhood community vitality, safe community, transportation, and mobility. So from our $700 million or so budget, they all get put into these 7 different buckets. And sometimes they can kind of have some interplay, like safe community and economic health. There might be some IT people there that, so anyways, they are ultimately the 7 kind of figureheads for our budget, and everything goes underneath that. Here are some of the main points of this budget. Planning for the 2050 tax. This was a huge revenue increase for our city budget. And our city budget is one of the things that Jenny Arndt said during the work session was like, she's very fortunate. We're very fortunate to have a very robust budget, very affluent community, that a lot of these things, like one of the big things that even Kelly Olson was talking about, like art in public places. He goes, it's not that I'm not for it. He goes, I think it's great. I think it's beautiful. But do I think that it should take the place of other things that aren't getting funded? Maybe, maybe not. But regardless, art in public places is one of the budget items that is getting funded. We're putting pictures and murals on our street, okay? I mean, there are communities that have a lot bigger and more dire needs, but we're able to get down to kind of the minute conversation of art in public places. Now, granted, there's a lot of different safety features to this, community involvement, engagement. So the 2050 tax is a huge, I believe it's $20 million annually that it brings in. Additionally, $10 million to parks and recreation, $5 million to climate, and $5 million to transit. So definitely pretty big there. Investment in asset management to existing backlogs. So like HVAC and buildings, there's just, there are some aging assets. Council priorities, we have, I believe it's 11 council priorities. And this is kind of what guides some of these above the line, below the line budget discussions. Does this meet a council priority that's been voted on, like 15-minute community, Vision Zero? There's these priorities that if it kind of comes down to it, if it is a conversation that doesn't meet one of these priorities, and then they'll probably go above the line. Investing in city talent to be a competitive employer. So, I mean, specifically on the engineer side, it sounds like attracting and retaining engineer talent for the city is really difficult, and lots of pay benefits and pay increases, but they want to keep and retain talent and attract talent to the city of Fort Collins. Now, I can tell you, as I've been watching the city council for the last many years, it seems like there are some pretty talented people who I want to say it was the guy, he was on like in our water department for like 28 years and got recruited elsewhere. And now, granted, somebody who's been with you for 28 years, my dad ran a company and 250 some odd employees, and many of them were with him for 20 plus years. And he said that one of the biggest challenges is when somebody's with you that long, their pay starts to get just incredibly high, because each year you're having a review and an increase. And, are you getting that much more work out of a 25-year vet that your pay is here versus somebody else? Regardless, these are all conversations that have to be had But the city is saying, hey, we need to have the dollars so that we can retain and attract awesome talent. Maintain service levels amidst significant inflationary challenges. That's kind of all over the place. Police services, utilities. It's just there are some inflationary pressures and on our expenses. And we will talk about how many full-time employees we have. I believe our city government has 2,400 plus employees with a, I don't know if it's a median or mean, but during the work session, median or mean, I don't know, annual salary of $90,000. So, I mean, 2,400 times 90,000. Okay. That's all you got to look at. And that equates because we're going to look at our annual personnel expenses, about $200 million for the city of Fort Collins. $200 million. Pandemic era funding, ARPA, those American Rescue Plan Act dollars are coming to an end. And there are programs, like one of the programs is rental assistance. But City of Fort Collins is coming back in and saying, hey, we're going to actually fill the gap on the rental housing because we thought that was a really eviction prevention that will not go without funding. So, but there are a lot of dollars, lots of dollars that are coming to an end that need to be addressed by this budget, possibly. Okay, we've already talked about timing, so we're not going to spend too much time there. Here's something I want. I think this is great. Where does our tax revenue come from? Okay, payments by residents and businesses for city services, so water and electricity, Aslan, picnic shelters, sales tax. So that's a big portion as well. Internal payments between city departments. I think that's kind of like those actually, that $95 million gets actually like pulled out, I believe, or maybe it's transfers. Well, I believe there's a big portion. It's like a $900 million budget, but when they pull out these transfers basically from one city entity paying another city entity, but they actually have to count that revenue, gets pulled back out. Payments by other governmental services. So we provide services like I was just talking to you about. Connections. They are providing services for Estes and Pulse. And there are other governmental services that are being provided, like bus services. Okay. Miscellaneous revenue, property taxes. Property taxes, again, are not a big, and we'll get down to that here shortly, revenue driver for the city. They do go a lot to PFA, Larimer County, and schools. Proceeds of issuing debt. So if we issue debt, property taxes from the Downtown Development Authority, licenses and permits. That's such a small freaking amount, but it feels like a big cost for like the people who are going to do a remodel. Gee whiz. I feel like that should be substantially reduced. If we're talking a $900 million budget, and maybe this is because maybe I'm biased because I'm in real estate and I've had to pull permits and it's not cheap. It's not like extremely expensive, but it's not cheap. I feel like that could be done away with. But again, all the dollars count. And interest on investments, damn, $17 million annually on just bank accounts. Can earn interest on bank accounts. Pretty awesome. Okay, we'll get down. Here's property tax breakdown. So I thought this was really pretty interesting. 62% goes to the Poudre School District, 24% to Larimer County, 7% city contribution to the Poudre Fire Authority, 33.5% to city operations. So really only 3.5% or so goes to the city from property taxes. So the majority of our schools are being funded by property taxes. I thought this was good. So utility rates, this is pretty interesting. So where Fort Collins ranks on utilities, and there's Longmont, La Platte, let's see here, Delta Montrose, Holy Cross, Colorado Springs. So our utilities, not too bad, but we will be seeing some pretty decent rate increases. We talked about this recently of 7 or 8 or 9%, and this is a lot of, we've got some infrastructure that we've got to build out. Our Rawhide 2 has got to be funded. And a lot of this, 95% of capital projects and the utility is paid by the ratepayer and not by, developmental fees, impact fees. Only 5% of their budget comes from impact fees. 95% comes from the utility ratepayer. Okay, here we go. Where do expenses go? Services from external business, including local employee pay and benefits. Damn, $230 million. Energy. We have the Platte River Power Authority provides energy for 4 areas. I think it's Fort Collins, Longmont, Estes, and Loveland. I don't know. But they're Platte River Power Authority. They're who would build out Rawhide. And we pay $115 million a year to get energy from them. Capital, including buildings, vehicles, large machinery, internal payments between departments. Again, that's what kind of they're called transfers. Here we go. They're called transfers, moving dollars from one bucket of money to another. And that really should get pulled out, but you have to account for it, apparently, whether it's GAAP or, whatever. Debt service, other supplies, other expenses. And here of the $724 million budget is where our money is going. High performing government's a big one. Economic health, safe community, smallest neighborhood and community vitality. I don't understand. I got to do a little bit of research because they haven't really talked about why is it going from 724 to 683. Let's see here. Yeah. I don't know why it goes down or why the expectations to go down. So I've got to either look into that or hear about what's going on. This is from the general fund. That kind of just gets into the minutia of it a little bit. All right. I want to talk to you guys about specific areas. Okay. So here we're going to break down these 7 areas where the money is going to go to. And I'll talk a little bit about what some of the conversations that they've been having. And again, there's going to be a Fort Collins City Council meeting tomorrow where they are going to have a hearing for public hearing. You can have your voices heard. Ongoing services, city council, and elections. Elections are expensive, and we're going to have ranked choice voting, not this year, but next year. And it will come into play. And Larimer County handles all of our voting. And I think they were saying it's like $300,000 for Larimer County to take that burden on. Utility customer service, special events, volunteer coordination, FCTV. I watch the City of Fort Collins City Council meeting every rerun, and there is planning and urban development, historic reviews. There is so much great information about the City of Fort Collins. If you just truly want to geek out, which it's really pretty great information, especially with what we do. We truly want to see and believe and feel to be experts in the community, and this is how we're doing it. There's great information. Business license and sales tax collection, great. Purchasing of equipment and services, employment, city vehicles and buildings. One thing that they were talking about, like police vehicles, they have like a 2-year life cycle. Now some, like the cemetery vehicle, I guess is a 1997 Chevy that's been in place. So there are conversations about like, how do we leverage these vehicles the best and how long do they last? But changes in the 2025 to 2026, artificial intelligence framework for governance, equity, and transparency. Artificial intelligence was talked about a little bit, not nearly as much as I think it probably should have, but our CIS, Computer Information Systems guy for the city, he might be a good one for our podcast, but he was on and he was talking about like, hey, there's already some great tools with AI. Some of them are very affordable, camera light and like body cam AI about traumatic events and having to go through there. It cuts down on time like 70%, but the city wants to be kind of on the front end, not give it all up to AI by any means, but be on the front end so that we are kind of on the forefront of AI in government. One Water Action Framework, Digital Experiment Implementation, City Manager's Office, Community Service, Youth Advisory Board. Culture and Recreation, $67 million. Recreation Program Centers, Epic, Mulberry, Adaptive recreation, parks and trails, Fort Collins Museum of Discovery, park planning, gardens on Spring Creek. That was a big conversation. They were saying that there was some underfunding for full-time employees, and especially, the gardens on Spring Creek, they do some fundraisers and they bring in their own revenue, and they definitely want the support there. Golf, Lincoln Center, art and public places. Here are some changes. Contractual staffing, recreation, this was weird. Recreation, universal preschool staffing. So UPK, the state, it supplies a lot of the funding for this, but there is a portion that the city of Fort Collins, they don't have to put any into it, but there's a shortfall of what the city of Fort Collins sees as needed. And so they put in, I think it's like 10 to 30, it's not much, 10, 30 or $40,000 annually to make sure that Fort Collins has a full staff for universal preschool. Behavioral support specialist staffing, Southeast Community Center. This is kind of, I would say, what is going to be on the forefront of people's minds over the next 2 to 3 years. This is going to be a $100 million building. A lot of funding's going there while other capital projects are taking place. This is really kind of a big focus for our capital as far as the city of Fort Collins goes. Parks and recreation infrastructure replacement projects. We talked with Mike Calhoun, again, a great episode on our Fort Collins Fellas podcast, where he kind of goes in depth and says, yes, we did have, now this was before the 2050 tax passed, and I'm sure he is thrilled. We need to have him back on. That'd be a great guest as well. Have him back on to talk about, hey, where are the city of Fort Collins, dollars going? And there are a priority list of the tennis courts at Roland Moore, parking lots, bathroom facilities. There are these kind of aging infrastructure pieces at these wonderful parks that we have. And they've got some $20-50 now. Parks, staffing operations for recent park and trail expansion, continued recreation trail development, continued development of neighborhood and community parks. Love it. Economic health, 161 million to 170 million. Business support, downtown landscape and maintenance. Go visit downtown Fort Collins, the lights, the flowers, painting pianos, just so many cool things. Downtown holiday lighting, big ticket item. Electric utility services, broadband, urban renewal authority, downtown development authority. Changes, connections, field sales representative staffing. So they, especially on the commercial side, Connections wants to go out and earn business on the commercial side. On the residential side, it's not as hard. And I bet you they're going to be hitting both residential and commercial, but on the commercial side especially, there are a lot of opportunities for Connections. Connection customer service representative staffing, light and power, economic health, multicultural business and entrepreneurship center, including staffing. That was one of the ARPA funding that is a shortfall that they found was really pretty successful about how many Hispanic businesses were started. And so they want to continue funding that so that there is an opportunity for multicultural business and entrepreneurship development. So that's pretty exciting. All righty. Environmental health, water utility service, wastewater conservation, natural areas, wastewater, indoor, outdoor air quality. That is such a big importance to Fort Collins, and I think they are addressing that head on. They just, it's kind of been like one of those issues that Fort Collins faces and addresses, but it's an ongoing challenge. City sustainability. Okay, the EPIC loan program, I believe that is for like lower income individuals who need help paying their utilities. Let's see your natural areas, nature in the city, air quality monitoring, environmental services. And a lot of those are priorities too of the city of Fort Collins. So like our 2030 goals of 80% reduction based off of our 2005 numbers and 2050 carbon neutral. So we've got a lot of big goals as the city of Fort Collins. Neighborhood and community vitality, $20 million. So this is a pretty small portion of our funding. But again, here's this rental housing program that I believe is where they're going to come in and help on the eviction. So there will be people who were getting helped from the ARPA funding, and this is going to continue forward. Mini grant expansion, affordable housing capital fund, grocery tax rebate, homeless core and homeless priorities. So graffiti abatement program. This was kind of interesting. When I was working at Old Town Square, if there was ever any graffiti downtown, we would just call this number. They'd come and take care of it. So like, those are the small things that I just think get overlooked in Fort Collins quite often, is like, yes, the electrical boxes, utility boxes, over 400 of them are painted, but also the ones that aren't, that get maybe graffiti or graffiti on walls, like, call the city and they are on it. They get on it to remove that graffiti quick. Like, it is a pretty clean city. There was a time where just recently, it was pretty unfortunate. Speaking about graffiti, there was some graffiti on buildings, like politically or whatever, provoked. And so there was like 10 buildings down in Old Town, and each one you drove by, you could just see it. And it was really just kind of sad. And you can still see the outline a little bit, but the city got on it. They got on it pretty quick to try to remove that the best they could. But, I bet you that was one person who just causes so much damage when that kind of stuff happens. Safe commuting. So like our police, obviously, like, I think there's a couple big things for you to have a successful city and city government. Economic. You have to have a seriously strong economic health as a city, and also a very safe community. From there, everything else is kind of secondary. But if you have those two that are kind of like your foundation, then I think you're pretty good. So ongoing services, emergency prevention, fire, 911, 911, not 911, dispatch, community policing, police control, K9, municipal court. We have a pretty cool municipal court. I don't have a lot of information on that. Maybe that would be a good person to have on the podcast. But we kind of keep people out of like district courts, county courts, and because we have a municipal court that takes care of, I think, certain sectors of things. Cybersecurity, big time issue, not issue, but thing that Fort Collins has its mind on. West Nile virus program. All right, here we go. And changes: Fossil Creek Stream Rehab, Trilby to LeMay. Water supply acquisitions. So that was, I think would be a 500 acre feet left we have to purchase. Combined one water lab, network firewall protection, police staffing, including officers for the HOPE team. This was a pilot program that's now getting funding. Homeless outreach and proactive engagement. So we have a lot of cool programs in Fort Collins. HOPE, we have Outreach Fort Collins. That's a kind of a buffer between. So cool to see that getting full-time budget dollars. Emergency service dispatcher, municipal court, and ranger staffing. Transportation. One of the big things that they were talking about on transportation is they wanted to see Sunday service and routes 11 and 12, which it looks like they're going to get those back on board. But one thing that's not in here is they're going to want Sunday service back online. Snow and ice removal, school crossings, safe routes, traffic, vision, zero fatalities and zero serious injuries is a big push for this. This is one of the priorities. Let's see here. Bicycle infrastructure, pedestrian walkway, transport, bus fleet replacement, arterial intersections, ADA bus stop improvements. Here are some of the big capital projects that we've got going on. Southeast Community Center and new parks and recreation trails. Offers in green represent, let's see here, light and power. Natural areas, bridge replacements, stormwater improvements, bicycle infrastructure, community capital improvement project. Active modes, plan infrastructure, CCIP again, Drake and College, Drake and LeMay. Pedestrian sidewalks, ADA, power trail at Harmony. Cannot wait for that. And then road extensions at Turnberry and Suniga. And they're all over the place, not really dedicated to one area. Southwest Fort Collins is a little left out, it looks like. But okay, I think that's kind of it. The last thing I want to talk to you about on the budget is FTEs. Where'd they go? There we go. So, man, 2,400 employees at the city of Fort Collins. I mean, that's huge. And they're looking at adding 55 people in 2025 and an additional 22 in 2026. So 77 additional people in the city of Fort Collins. Now I get it, like as your community and your city grows, and we did have Travis Storen on the podcast. He has a great podcast about this budget process. And I think there are some checks and balances to make sure that all the people that are employed are operating kind of to the highest extent possible for them and what's needed. But, man, it's not bloat. I don't think bloat necessarily is the right word, but there's not a lot of times where you see reduction in staffing. And that's interesting, especially when you have things like AI taking place and efficiencies. So, and maybe that 77 number would have been 100 without the AI, and maybe it would have been, maybe they're not, maybe I'm not necessarily seeing that, but regardless, we are adding 77 employees at the city of Fort Collins. So if you're looking for a job, hey, go look and talk to the city of Fort Collins. That median or mean, I can't remember, of $90,000 to work for the city. All right, we still got a couple last things, but we're finishing up. Things to do this weekend. The New Belgium half marathon and 5K Sunday, October 6th, starts at 7:30 a.m. You're definitely going to want to sign up for that and get your registration, pick up your packets, all of that good stuff. And then this week as well is Tour de Corgi, which if you have a Corgi and you want to go tour that Corgi, now is it. October 5th, 9 a.m. to 2:30 p.m., Civic Center Park in Fort Collins, $5. So it's a big thing in Fort Collins, Tour de Corgi. I've never really witnessed it. I do want to talk about some developments under review real quick, because some things that are happening are pretty cool in Fort Collins. At 300 East Mountain, the Lyric got demolished. That building is no longer there. And it looks like they're going to build a two-story facility, potentially build a two-story facility for offices and a green room to support the wonderful armory. AT&T Wireless Communications on top of 1501 South LeMay, so building a cell tower on top of 1501 South LeMay. A dog daycare at 428 Linden is, these are all conceptual reviews. There's still lots of steps for them to actually come into play, but they're renting and they would want to have a luxury, high-end dog boarding site. They want to convert a single unit into a four unit at 705 Maple Street. And then the Heritage annexation, they want to take 13.6 acres over by kind of Dry Creek, Timberline, and Mulberry. Build a new building, gymnasium, track and field. So definitely pretty cool on that northeast side. Again, I think the northeast is just going to be really awesome here in the near future with lots of different buildings and developments that are happening there. Whew. That's all I got. Again, I'm not going to be here for 2 weeks. First Monday in God knows how long. At least, well, last Christmas I wasn't here, and Izzy took over for 2 Mondays, which was awesome. But I'm going to be gone, and there's not going to be anyone here. So I appreciate you guys watching every Monday. If you guys have ever any questions or comments or anything like that, you can comment. You can subscribe if you haven't. We have a ton of people who are watching these videos who aren't subscribers. It's a vanity metric, but regardless, it means a lot to me if you do that. And if you like the content, give it a thumbs up. But we are here every Monday talking to you about all things Fort Collins. So thank you for joining and taking the time out of your day to learn about the city and area that I love so much. Take care.